I was a pretty quiet kid. I did well in school, which made people look at me differently. I never quite understood why. It was as though test scores, academic metrics, put a label on everyone. They told me I was smart by giving me A's or 100%, but the system never quite made sense to me. I had a teacher in grade 6 who had us all write down what intelligence looked like. She was ahead of her time and had us question these metrics, prompting us to consider different qualities that make a person intelligent. She used words like awareness and kindness. This really stuck with me. As I grew up, I became deeply fascinated with human dynamics. Traveling the world, I began talking to all sorts of people from different backgrounds and walks of life. In fact, I'll have been to 50 countries before the age of 30, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. Now, as I'm completing my Master's of Education, I just have all these thoughts and feelings flooding every corner of my mind as I struggle to make sense of the world. I continue to wonder, what are we telling our youth about intelligence? What are we telling the world about what it means to be an educated individual? How has Western society shaped these views? What if the future of globalization is not rooted in an American or Western model, but rather in a broader understanding of the complex question, what is an educated person? The presence of Western hegemony has often marginalized other knowledge systems and alternative cultural learnings. Stromquist and Monkman address this in their work on integration as it relates to globalization and education, pointing out the significant influence of government and political climates on educational models. If we look at history, diving back to the Second World War and how Godard critiques the principles of radical eugenics as it relates to this Western dominance, highlighting the often devastating consequences of such ideologies, including social division and even genocides. Godard asserts that intelligence is not only a measure of cognitive ability but also reflects an individual's capacity for social efficiency and adaptability. Before I dive into that big question, what is an educated person? Let's look back at the sub-questions I mentioned. First, what are we telling our youth about intelligence? Scientists suggest that current academic metrics and intelligence tests aim to support meritocracy by measuring only a small fraction of intelligence rather than considering a wider range of skills and aptitudes more relevant to individual culture and upbringing. In other words, the classroom tests generated by Western models serve more as a way to divide society into higher and lower classes. A study done in Turkey showed that students viewed intelligence as an unchangeable feature. You're either born smart or born stupid. What's challenging about this misconception is that individual perceptions of intelligence often stem from how people see themselves fitting into Western models. If we explore diverse cultural approaches to learning, we see that Western approaches to educational models hold cultural biases. Now, Turkey is a great example of a country that serves as a unique bridge between Europe and Asia. But as these Western models are pushed forward through globalization, aspects of this unique culture are not being appreciated. When I was camping through East Africa, I can tell you I've never felt less educated. And yet, technically, I had more education than the people there by Western standards. That brings me to my second and third sub-questions. What are we telling the world about what it means to be an educated individual? And how has Western society shaped these views? In other words, why is my perception so corrupt and inaccurate? Why has society told me I'm so educated when clearly it depends on where you put me? Colonialism has certainly misinformed our beliefs throughout history and continues to shape the media today, including film, TV, marketing, and more. This phenomenon has not only effects on our behavior and self-perception, but also on how we view each other. It reinforces stereotypes. Media shapes our minds. This is why knowledge translation and mobilization are so important today. Prioritizing knowledge, mobilization, and fostering professional collaboration are essential for evaluating and improving our current systems. We must look inward and reassess our own biases and misconceptions in order to reframe what it means to be an educated person in this world. Now that I've addressed those sub-questions, I want to reel us back in and tackle that big question. What is an educated person? I want to foster a deeper public understanding of what it means to be an educated individual in contemporary society through a globalized lens. I want you to walk away with something you can integrate into your own framework, no matter where you live or what your background is. I hope to open people's minds and invite a more inclusive framework of how we view each other as educated individuals. With that being said, I want to introduce the ABLE theory. The ABLE theory is an acronym that embodies the insights I've gained from my coursework, independent research, and personal experiences traveling the world. ABLE stands for Adapt, Belong, Lead, and Elevate. I have deliberately chosen the term able for its definition, having the power, skill, means, or opportunity to do something. I find this accurately reflects the essence of this subject. Let me break this down even further, starting with A, adapt. As I've traveled the world, I've noticed the best way to get by in different countries and cultures is through a process known by many as mirroring. A simple way of saying this is monkey see, monkey do, except much more neurologically profound than this, of course. According to Caruana, mirroring both physical cues, habits, and facial motions promotes social connection. Rewiring our brains to suit our environment is essential to understanding what education is in various contexts. One might go as far as to say that we must adapt our views in each personal interaction, looking not only at culture and demographics, but also at talents and interests. I really enjoyed reading this article by Dan McAdams. He says, a full description of personality commonly requires a consideration of the extent to which a human life expresses unity and purpose, which are the hallmarks of identity. Thus, the way we evaluate what an educated person looks like requires adapting our frameworks not only to cultural identity, but also to personal identity. But you see, cultural identity affects students' self-perception. These two components influence each other. Let's move on to our second letter, B, for belong. It has been found that conventional Western tests often measure cultural assimilation rather than true intellectual potential. It was proposed that effective functioning within one's cultural context is a more valid measure of intelligence. Similarly, it has been shown that mindful engagement with tradition can foster an increased sense of intelligence. Kaufman's insights encourage a broader appreciation of diverse intellectual capacities, ultimately urging a shift in how we define and nurture intelligence across contexts. He highlights the roles of personal engagement, effort, creativity, and individual interest in shaping one's intelligence and understanding of it. All this to say, many Western models being pushed forward try to make people fit in, rather than creating an environment where we all belong. Let's move on to L, for lead. For one of my courses, I did an executive summary on Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime. What I took from his work is that leadership is neither good nor evil, but a form of genius. It is the space between an idea and its impact. It is only how we apply leadership that involves morals, ethics, and guiding principles, which vary depending on the circumstance. He examines the most advanced system of racial oppression known to humanity, apartheid, by challenging universal belief systems to which most can relate. It is simple. Corrupt leaders succeed by exploiting human weaknesses. People want something to blame for their problems, and you give them that something to blame. You separate people into groups and make them hate one another so you can run them all. What I'm challenging with our views of what is an educated person is this tendency to segregate each other into groups, into elites, into doctors versus tradesmen, giving worth to different things based on what we believe is education. Building trust between followers and leaders is essential, but what if leadership is based on mutual respect? What if giving every person worth is more relevant in a globalized world than official transcripts and credentials? I believe this is a nice introduction into my last letter, E, for elevate. Depending on where you're from, test scores in education can mean different things. Some Indian cultures, for example, were found to view these metrics more as community success. Kind of like when you do well, we do well. I believe there's something special to this concept. Intrinsic motivation occurs when individuals see themselves as initiators of action. When we see the impact of elevating each other, we work harder. Social support has been found to lead to greater net gains. If one of the goals of globalization is to move us towards a more unified, peaceful society, shouldn't we look for ways to elevate one another? Could that not be through how we view education? Epstein and Youthos analyze the limitations of traditional educational frameworks in the developing world. They go further and identify critical pillars of effective educational reform, including empowerment. When people see how they can contribute to society and be respected, and also appreciate how others contribute in different ways, human relationships and dynamics improve. Building on each other's strengths is significantly more effective than competing for A's and 100% on generic tests. The benefits of collective strengths use are evidently larger in teams with higher strengths diversity. The four elements of the able theory flow together. We must adapt our views of what it means to be an educated person based on who we interact with and where we are interacting. We must understand that we all have a place we belong. We can help each other achieve that sense of belonging. We must lead in a manner that gives others worth. Finally, we must elevate one another to create an integrated world that is both accepting and inclusive. That is true success. So, what is an educated person? Maybe my simple answer to this would be, if everywhere we go looks different, then maybe an educated person looks different everywhere we go. The able theory is a framework that helps people change their perception on what an educated person looks like. It's not a promise, it's not a means to an end, and it's not a miracle that will save education. It's a theory that will hopefully help us move forward in this world as more open-minded individuals who can respect all educational systems. After all, theories are building blocks. It is vital we learn to shape our views on education in an inclusive manner as it relates to globalization. Education has the potential to be more inclusive with technological advances helping us connect. Even Albert Einstein said the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. So perhaps it's time we change our views on how we choose to answer that question. What is an educated person?